with the top down structure, it actually goes perfect to the name of your podcast with Preacher Boys. Now, I'm gonna guess you a preacher boy yourself growing up?
No, but I was around all the like preacher boy competitions and like
Really?
all the, so like there was a lot of pressure on me to pursue ministry in some way. And all I wanted to do as a kid was at like 6-ish, I was running around with a camcorder, like a VHS camcorder, making movies with my friend. Like I only wanted to make movies. I only wanted to tell stories. I want to be creative. Surprise, surprise. Like that's what I wanted to do. And, and then I would get this thing of like, well, yeah, but you can do that, but also you need to do this as your ministry though. And I was always like, can I serve God with this thing that he obviously gave me an interest in, And luckily my parents are always supportive of me pursuing the work that I wanted to do. They obviously pushed me to be part of a church and like all those sorts of things, but like they were like, yeah, we'll buy you this GoPro, we'll save up and get you this thing. It's like we'll help you move along in this direction. But Preacher Boys, to me, I don't even remember how the name, like, it just kind of came to me where it was like I was sitting there thinking in my head about like the boys club of fundamentalism, and I was thinking about like guys covering for each other. And I was like, it's a boys club, and then I was like, it's a preacher boys club though. Like they all call themselves like preacher boys. And then I was sitting there thinking about like all the times that I'd hear pastors say like, don't be a playboy, be a man, like they would say stuff like that. And it was like, all these guys are acting like boys. Like you have grown men acting like children, covering for each other, preacher boys. And it was like a double-edged sword at this point, because like when I reach out, like everybody in that movement knew what I was talking about and was like, oh my God, preacher boys. Yeah, that makes sense. And then like now, like I have people that listen who are like Mormon or Lutheran who relate to like 98% of what I talk about. And they're like, but I just don't get the name. Or like I have people that are like, okay, preacher boys, like it's my rap name or something. And so like now I'm like, I wish I would have picked something like more clear, but now I'm too far into the brand.
Preacher Boys would be a really, really cool rap name. And I think that
with the Z,
all of this sounds like
boys.
Very positive attributes to your name here.
If there isn't a gospel R&B group called Preacher Boys, we need to
we can start it right now.
We need to start it immediately. Yeah,
I think it's right here.
We can be producers at the very least
with the Preacher Boys.
Yeah, wow. I gotta tell you, I am surprised to hear that you weren't a preacher boy. Honestly, that did catch me off guard. I thought for sure I was in the presence of a fellow preacher boy.
Well, I never was interested in preaching ever until I left my childhood church. And when I was at the church, that was like a lot lighter version of what I had been in. And like they were more like trying to pursue like the J.D. Greer, Matt Chandler, like gospel centered, world, which that's a whole nother conversation. But like I was given I used to be terrified of people, used to be terrified of speaking. Like I literally, this is crazy because I do a podcast now, but like when I was like 19, I had to do a video talking about the fact that I make videos for people, like just talk about my department and what I did. I went in at 11 p.m. while the office was closed, so nobody would be there. Nobody could hear what I was saying. I stood in front of the camera, and I swear to you, my eyes welled up with tears, and I started crying, looking in the lens, because and that was like 8 years ago, and I was so terrified. And something happened though, like during that time, I feel like I really kind of found a lot of confidence. Like the more I got out of that movement, and I started going like, I would start feeling something. I was like, I need to share this. And so that led, in the beginning, it was like, I want to preach about stuff that I'm not hearing talked about. So like, I would be like, well, the way missions is done in the church is wrong. And I was working in the missions organization. So it's like, let me talk about why we should be supporting local people in their own countries who are already doing stuff, instead of sending a white guy for a lot more money to an area that doesn't know the language, that doesn't know the traditions, that doesn't have any in the community, when there's guys running orphanages who have absolutely nothing, and we can go fund them. So like my sermons were like, they were coming from a place of like, let's fix this. And I really fell in love with preaching. And it's kind of ironic, like right at the peak of where I was like, oh, I love being able to share what I think is really important topics and messages. I ended up doing Preacher Boys and leaving that one ministry. And now I'm in a spot where like the chance of me ever preaching a sermon again is very low. Let's just say that. But I've got the podcast now, and that's kind of become the avenue for sharing that stuff. So I kind of became like a preacher boy late in the game by choice instead of, getting thrust into it, which is probably good. Cause I
Probably.
I tell my wife now,
I'd say.
I was like, it kind of, if I didn't have any ethics, I would crush it as an IFB pastor. Cause I feel like I could put some, if I started an IFB church, I think I could crack the formula. But
I tell TJ this all the time too, and I agree that you would definitely be the same way as well. Yeah, like you both have that, just what makes you really good to listen to, like compelling storytelling, voices, all that stuff. I think that's really
sometimes some unearned confidence, which is key.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I thought I had totally misread you. I was like, no, hold on. All right, this makes more sense. I went toward the end right there because yes, this is the conversations I have and thoughts that, you have those intrusive thoughts sometimes. And if I had, lower standards and no morals, and
you guys are over here like, we could be so evil.
Listen, look, like the money is just begging to be made. It's just like every
I need a private jet. Come on,
right? It's just like the amount of work it would take compared to how much money you could just like swim in. It's astounding that more people.
Let's do it. Forget it.
Right,
let's do it.
Let's just split right now. Did we just get saved?
I know, right? Yeah. Did we?
I feel called.
The Holy Spirit is moving amongst us, because if you have even an ounce of demagoguery in you, it would just be a cakewalk.
And what's mind blowing to me is how so many of these speakers speak 3 times a week and are still some of the most uninteresting speakers you will ever hear in your life.
Oh my God. I'm glad that you brought that one up. Yeah.
Like I'm just like, if you have even basic speaking ability, you can rise the ranks so quickly. And I have,
and bro, you've been practicing. You've been up here.
So, there's something, but anyway, I'm not going to start a church. Just let me dispel that rumor now. But
yeah,
I would immediately join either of your churches, just so you guys know.
Yeah, the bar is subterranean. Yeah, right. Yeah, like the bar is subterranean. It is so low that like anyone could clear it if you can string a sentence together at all. Right. Before we go on, I got a reference or talk about one of the comments I saw here. Where'd it go? Jerome says that 5 bonus points if you can answer why Baptists never make love standing up. I'm gonna guess it's because it looks too much like dancing. That's going to be my guess. Yeah, all right. Because I think I heard that. But yeah, that's going to be like that. But yeah, it's true. It's just it conditions you to like follow, like you said, Eric, people with this unearned confidence that you kind of feel honestly that they call it being lost. You feel lost, and you have someone who has all the answers for you. That's actually what I miss the most about this. I don't know about you two, but what I miss the most about the old life is having all the answers. You
didn't have to do any kind of like internal searching or like checks and balances on yourself, because all you have to do is like go to your pastor, and if there's a problem, if there's something big that you can't handle, and he's going to unpack it with you or for you in a biblical manner. Right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I really got personal about that, but I know that meaning.
Yeah, certainty is like so desirable, and it is. It's kind of the thing that I think is funny about all this is that I think people go, oh, you were probably always bitter and you looked for an excuse to leave. I'm sure you can get versions of that. And I actually found my journals back here. But I actually found something I wrote in like January 2020 when I started the show. And I literally wrote, one of the things that's enraging about church abuse is not that I despise the church, but because I wish I could still love it. Yeah. And I think that mentality of, like the comfort and the peace and like the nostalgia I have, like I still have nostalgia for certain hymns and the aesthetic of a pew and like the thought of around Christmas Eve, like I'd love to pack a pew with my daughter and like hold a candle, and like do those things that meant so much to me as a kid that now I look at it and go like, it's so tainted, where it's like I wish what it claimed to be, it actually was.
Yes.
And it wasn't, and so I think it's almost like this sense of loss that like this thing I thought was there is not. The relationships I thought I had were not there. And, I think the way I deal with that now is just being thankful I realized it sooner, rather than being one of the stories which I hear all the time of I turned 65 and suddenly realized that my entire life I'd been in this. I'm thankful, like, oh, I realized that at, mid-20s, I've got a lot of time to make up, and it's anyway. Yeah. I when I stumbled across on my journal, I was like, yeah, this kind of sums up exactly it. And it was not something I ever shared publicly. It was just something I wrote down as a thought, where it's like, I would love this to be what I thought it was, and it's not. So
I have felt that so many times too. And those little moments of grief, it is grief. Like it's a form of grief, but they sneak up on you very unexpected, and I hear you too. I think about it a lot with my children, and I'm glad that you said that about just continue things that you knew as a child that you feel like should be implemented into your kids' lives, maybe perhaps then you're like, well, wait, there's these greater issues there, can't introduce that, and then you have to grieve that little thing or feel all of this, there's no end to it. There's no like other side of growing up in a culture or environment like this. I mean, there is, you can find peace and stability and all that. I don't mean to imply that, but those little moments of having to remember or like check yourself or just make a decision about something really tiny, but deciding how you believe it.
Sure. And accepting what it was, like I had somebody interview me and they kept asking like, tell me about how bad your childhood was. And I was like, my childhood was pretty good for most of it. Like in terms of my experience with it, like, but I grew up 7 days a week on the same campus. So like all my best memories, worst memories, and everything in between are there. So like I have some things that I just accept as, I don't need this thing to be traumatic. Like I had fun doing this thing that was pretty much harmless, like it just happened to be a thing I did there. I don't need to associate all with like, oh, this was really bad. And on the flip side, I also can accept that there were some things that were really bad that I never have to repeat, and I can take them for what they were. But that's like you said, it's a constant, like, to steal a Ginger Duggar phrase that I think she uses really incorrectly, but like it is that disentangling thing where it's like, what is the thing that's helpful? What's the thing that's not? But if I can reclaim that word from her and use it appropriately, I think that would be close to what it is.
I'm sure she won't mind. And I wrote down so much about what you just said there, Eric, because it's stuff that I think about all the time. First, you mentioned how incredibly insulting it is when people will just dismissively say stuff like, oh, well, if you really look into this and if you open your heart, it's going to be right there for you. You just need to search, as if you didn't do that, as if you didn't spend years of your life praying and searching, crying, just begging for God to show you something that you believed with all your heart was there. And for them to say, oh, well, I'm sure it's there. You just need to work a little bit harder. And then you ask them just, basic questions about the Bible and they have no clue. They have no clue at all. It's insulting and it's infuriating. And the other side of that is when folks will hear that you're no longer a believer, or that you've just left, like you might be a believer still, but you just left their certain sect of it. And they automatically go to, oh, well, who hurt you? Well, what happened to you? What was the bad event that made you leave? And it's like, no, actually, it wasn't necessarily that. It wasn't all bad.
Yeah. Well, and this is funny, and I forget who said it. It was probably just a random person on social media somewhere, and I just took it from them. But whoever it is, credit to you. But somebody said that one time where they talked about that question about. And I'll address the comments about the Duggars. That was by no means an endorsement of Ginger Duggar. So that was purely sarcastic. I did not like her book. That's why I said I'm reclaiming the word. Don't hear me wrong. This is not a pro Duggar channel if you're new to me. But in terms of like the in terms of the issue of what was I talking about? I got thrown off by the Duggar comment. I was talking about I just want to be very clear, I'm not a Duggar fan.
We mentioned people who assume that something bad happened to you. Yeah.
So somebody had mentioned that, and they said, when people say, "Oh, you left your church," and they say, "Oh, it's because someone hurt you," and someone said, "Isn't that enough?" And it was such a reframe of that question where it's like asking someone like, "Oh, you left your marriage. What, did he hit you?" Oh, you left this relationship. What, did they abuse you? Oh, you don't talk to your parents. What, did they hurt you? It's like, that's
Where's
enough.
the punchline? Yeah, they did.
It's like, okay, you left your church because of sexual abuse. That's probably enough.
Yeah.
Like, if that's not enough, what is? And that, when I heard it reframed that way, because I found myself, especially in the early days of the show, I had to prove the validity of my choice of leaving. And it's like, I left because it was not healthy for me. I left because it was not healthy for anyone that was there. And that's enough. And if someone doesn't think that's enough, that's on them, not on me. And so I wanted to address that. Like, I think so many times we have to like validate the way that we feel about it. And it's like, no, like
it was icky.
Like it was bad for you. You were dying in that world and you left, and like that's enough of a reason. It doesn't have to be like, well, they were horrible and they were abusive and they were, sexually abusing people, but they led a lot of people to the Lord. It's like, well, that's not enough to balance that seesaw. Like, we have to stop kind of fighting that battle, because you're not going to win anyway. Like, you can argue with people all day long about the reason you left. They've already decided you left for the wrong reason.
Yeah.